Should be going live anytime soon. Checking the screen, sending data. Okay, going live, sending the data, talking, hopefully so someone can hear me. I can see there live. I'm on Facebook. And I can see myself. Okay, I'm live. I always like to check the sound. Terrible. I can't trust it. Is the sound working? Yes, it does. We have sound. Excellent. This is good. Right, okay, so thanks very much for tuning in, if you do tune in. Oh, thanks Walkabout Games for saying that you can hear me, that's great. And hi there. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. It's Sunday, it's 7:10 in the UK time, south of London. It's been a kind of wet day out there today, and been out of the house and done a few things, but back this afternoon and continued work on this series of stuff that's behind me here. I can roll it out, not too much damage. Yeah, I've got a series of 15mm buildings which I've been building over the last few days, and I've got to the point now, all the airbrushing is done, and I now need to paint on some details. I've also put decals on there, so I've put water slide decals all over them, and those have been sealed on as well. So the only thing left really, well, when I say the only thing, hours and hours of super detailing, weathering is needed now. And today I was in two minds. I've got some AK filters, which are these enamel type filters, and I've had them for a few years, and I just got out my black brown one and Panzer grey one of these, and they'd gone completely solid like a gel, which really surprised me because they're enamels. So all I can think is that AK Interactive put them in bottles or something with something odd in there that was going to react to them, because the bottle lid was tight shut. I've had them for about 4 or 5 years. Tore it open. I've thrown them in the bin now, unfortunately, but they had really gone into a gel. And enamels are meant to be really thin, and they wash onto a model really easy to do weathering. So I've got lots of large surfaces to do, and I thought enamels are quite forgiving. I'll stick them on there. They stink. You've got to thin them down a bit. So that troubled me that they'd gone wrong. They'd turned into a gel. And this one as well, it's not that visible. You can probably see it actually there. The pigment seems to have completely separated from the enamel medium as well in this. So I started to shake it up, and shaking it does sort of get it dispersed a bit, but there's still a good lump in the bottom. So I don't trust these. I had used them before to good effect, and I'll show you where I had used them. If I zoom in to this. Oh, right into that then. Okay. So this is a 6mm Battletech Aerotech model, and I got a few of them. I did it all at the same time to try and keep them in theme. And those have had enamel filters added, and you can see it's given them that kind of candy colour because the enamel filters applied over everything. So it's gone into the panel lines between the different panels on these, and a filter does a sort of yeah, I could give them a stir, but I haven't got to that stage. I opened the two that had turned to a real solid gel, and then I thought, oh, should I bother with these? I thought no, because I've had sort of stinky messes with them before. So I was just about to move on to what I was going to do instead. But anyway, that's what the filters. I've had some good results with those AK filters a long time ago. So this is about 6-7 years ago that these were done. And they do give you an even look over the entire model, which is quite good. I think I just need to turn my focus thing on. There. That's a bit better. So they give you an even colour, because that brownie colour is now over the green and over the sand, which is that colour is Israeli sand grey. And because it's over the two, it gives you an even tone across the whole model, which looks pretty good in my view. So that's using an enamel filter on there. which I'm not going to do today, but that was what I was trying to do before I realised that half the paints that I needed had got a funny blob in the pot, turned into gel. So I'm using these. These are lifecolor, and they do these. This is a Payne's grey liner, and you've got black grey, and what's the other colour that's quite good? Blue burned exhaust, burnt umber, which is probably between the two. It's either black umber or burnt umber that I'm going to use. And they are, you can see the sort of colours in there. In fact, one of them I can tell I've already put a ball bearing in. This one has not got, this one has not got an agitator in it, so I'm going to slap one in while I'm at it. So it's just a steel ball bearing, pop it in. And that means any pigment in the bottom there gets properly agitated. That one's already got one in there. So yes, I think I'm going to use a mix of either of these two because they're a nice darkish colour. And then I will thin them with water because they're acrylic based. But what they have is this remover in the set with these Lifecolor paints, and it means that if you put too much on an area, you can just drop your brush in this and it will remove it afterwards. So in the same way that enamels, you can use a bit of enamel thinner to remove the offending tide mark or whatever you've left behind, you can use this acrylic remover, adjustable non-smelling washes. So yeah, they don't call them filters, they do call them washes. So imagine a bit like the Citadel's new contrast colours. If you had a way to remove them in a subtle way, you could use this. And because I've got these, I love the Lifecolor colours. I'm happy to use those instead of the stinky enamels that I was thinking of using. So yeah, goodbye naval weathering streaking for red hulls. That looks like it's still good though, but I know I definitely bought this one a bit later on than the Panzer Grey that turned into gel. So right, well, there's a few things I'm going to need to do. First thing, I was wet palettes. I've used wet palettes for years. Now I'm doing these videos quite a lot. I just make tiny ones myself, and I also explode the myth of wet palettes, and that's that some people think that, oh, if I buy a wet palette, I can go for lunch, have an evening out, and then just whip the palette open, and whatever paint's in there is going to be usable. That absolutely does not work with miniature hobby paints. Maybe with thick acrylics from a tube. But definitely with hobby paints, if you've got a wet palette, when you seal it up, it's great for keeping the paint fresh for half an hour or so, but then it will just all go to a watery sludge in there, and I've had several different wet palettes. So for me, I don't even have a lid on my wet palette anymore. I just use it to make sure the paint doesn't go too dry in front of me. So basically a wet palette, what is it? It's a kind of a container, and for me just an old bit of plastic from a miniature case, and then just so I happen to have 2 bits of blotting paper, and blotting paper just absorbs the water. So I'm just spraying a bit of water in there. And because this is a small container, I don't want too much water, I just want it to be absorbed into that piece of blotting paper, and then you use tracing paper, and this one I've used before, then I never got around to actually doing the painting with it, so it just sort of crinkled up. So then when you push that down, it kind of attaches itself, and it does that thing where it tries to peel off until it's got moistened all the way through. So you sometimes have to sort of work at holding it down. But what I do is I've got these little magnetic vehicles that I've had around for a while. I did have another one around here. Well, that one's holding the thing down. But that helps just to hold the thing on. It also helps me in terms of the filming because this is a steel plate. Those magnets mean that I'm holding that all in place while I'm painting. I don't need much because I'm just doing a small amount. So what I'm doing is I'm going to show you what I've done so far. Ta-da! This is the one I did earlier. So here we go. This is the container yard that I was working on. And this is actually nearly all painted, but I haven't painted these. The only thing that are missing are there's a few bits inside the skip that need doing, and that piece of metal. And obviously I haven't detailed the base. I need to do some painting on there as well, but I'm going to do all the weathering on everything else before I sort of finish the bases. And yeah, I think the stream just dropped momentarily there. I'm not sure why. But anyway, I've got various decals I've put on there, and I've also painted some little bit of varnish over them to seal them on. I've also added some graffiti decals, as you can see on the back there too. A little Darth Vader stencil as well. They're looking good enough to me. When the model's completely dull coated, these any shine left on these will completely sort of be lost. And also when the weathering's on there, it should sort it out. So that's interesting. I've had a few drops of the signal. There we go. Dangers of live streaming. I can see the signals dropping. I'm getting a good rate though. And then it seems to disappear altogether. But anyway, never mind. So as I was saying, these are done to the point where they need weathering, so I don't need to do any painting on here anymore. It would be the weathering stage, which I use those lifecolor paints to do. These more complex bases. Oh, they did conform to the surface okay, Graham, actually. They weren't too bad. They weren't too bad at all. So we've got here the other bases. So the only thing I've done on these is I've put the decals on. I've also used some silver paint to do a little bit of painting silvering on some platform areas here and here, and on the top. If we get in close to that top lid there, it's probably about as close as I can get in, unless I zoom with the zoom. Here we go. So you can see there that I've done a couple of little bits of painting. If I point them out with a pointer, handy paintbrush, I've dry brushed some silver over everything, which is, oh, that paintbrush is a bit odd looking, look at that. And it obviously needs a bit of moistening. I've painted those bottles blue, so those weren't blue, those were just left while I was doing the airbrushing. The only thing that got airbrushed on here was the red container and the green on the top, and then the same with the stripe around there. I masked it. So in terms of simplicity of airbrushing, I've only airbrushed red, white, and 2 tones of green I did. So I did a kind of initial green and then a lighter green, and then it's a dry brush of silver to make it look like people have been scuffing their way along there a lot. And I've left the funnel as a sort of grey, but I did do a little dry brush of silver across there as well. And then that decking materials had a dry brush of a kind of bolt gun. What's it called? It's called Pig Iron by Privateer Press, and it's a very black silver, so it's kind of subtle. That's what I've used all over it so far. And the bottles have had a blue paint, just one colour paint, and then they had a little dry brush of the silver along with everything else. Oh, lost focus there momentarily. And as you can see, I've also put, how close can we go into those decals to see if you can even read them? Be interesting to see. Yeah, so I've put these tiny decals that I had on those bottles as well, and a little warning sign on there, and another small warning sign there too, just to sort of boost the detail on the top, and I'm quite pleased with that so far, really. I mean, it also looks good from a distance, which is kind of the interesting thing. Oh, and there's a gun that I glued on there as well that was from a sprue from the Plastic Soldier Company in the UK. They do a series of World War II extra bits and pieces, and that was one of them. So I stuck that on there, just for a bit of fun, really. Almost like I had in mind sort of computer games where people sort of run around and, stumble across a weapon here and there. There's also a rifle I just put there, which I haven't painted yet, so it reminds me that I need some paint. And on this side, there's just some additional water slides, including a kind of graffiti piece there, and some smaller words and text on the side of the building. Just to sort of, again, it's amazing how just a couple of lines of white text can bring a whole piece together. So bear that in mind if you're doing anything like this. And obviously that graffiti up on the bottle top, the container on the top also adds to it. Yeah. So that's that one. What do I need to do on here? So what I need to do on here with the paintbrush is I need to do the logo, because I wasn't going to airbrush that. That logo needs doing. Paintbrush wise, I need to paint that small rifle. I may need to paint, so there's another one of those Darth Vader stencils there. There's a window here, and half of mine to just sort of black out the windows, so paint a sort of dark blackish blue in there, not worry about it too much. Oh, that logo, which is barely visible. There's a brass etched logo that says Area 5. I'm not even sure how I'm going to paint that, but because it's going to be troublesome to get the paint just on the text without making it look a bit rough. So I'm not sure about that. And I've got an exit sign there, which is very tiny. That should be a bit easier just to dry brush. Oh, and there's a thing on there's another brass etched image on there saying workshop, but you can't see it because it's just sort of painted, been sprayed white along with everything else. So logo on there, which is going to do sort of a yellow colour. So I have a brown to put on their base, and then a yellow to go over the top. Simple. And then I might blend those two in the wet palette there, just to sort of make a sort of gradient of sorts on there. The other one, again, there were a couple of bottles on the top, so I've done those in the same colour as the other one. And there's more graffiti on the side, and then there's a couple of text logos and things that are on there too. Another Darth Vader. I thought I'd dot a few of these stencils of Darth Vader around just for a laugh, really. Not because it's in theme with anything in particular, just because I thought it was an interesting graffiti stencil. And then on this side I've got to do the text there, which I was going to paint brown as well, but then use a red. So I was going to have a red logo there. And just in terms of colour palette and theme, obviously this one's got half-tone blue and white on here. And I've kind of picked out, again, when you're sort of using a palette, I thought I'd do those bottles blue, so they're kind of in keeping, even though they're a slightly different colour blue. They nearly match this, so in terms of that tone and the colour differences, that's good. And then the green on there just separates it as well a little bit, but then obviously I've used green doors to match the green items on the roof. So again, this has been dry brushed with the silver on the top. And a couple of additional decals were stuck on there, like a warning sign. That's got to be painted too, like a little console on there. I thought I'd just do that sort of blue with little white dots, like a computer console. And there's another gun from the Plastic Soldier Company there, just on for extra detail. And just a reminder for anybody that's maybe not seen this before, or has seen these before and wants to just be reminded by me over and over and over again. When I build these, I build them in a way where I can put either multi-bases or single-based models can sort of fit on there. Interestingly, this is Cerisa Precision, and these steps, they don't really take a penny, but I have had some models on 5p's, and the 5p's literally slide in. So if you have a 5p piece based force, or probably 1 cent maybe, or maybe 1 cent's probably more like a penny, but you can fit the penny on the top there. I mean, who's going to have it on each stair rung anyway? It's just a case of, you can move models around, and I give them different elevations, which is why I was sort of working on a train like this. Just, again, always thinking about when I'm building terrain, how you might use it so that you can get vehicles through areas. You've got a wall, but I'm not surrounding the entire place with a wall, so some cover could be gained for some troops. And at the same time, you've got space to sort of move out, or you could obviously go over the wall, but I didn't want to do something where, when I'm making this modular terrain, I end up with like a completely walled compound. Now you could do that. You could build one, because this is a factory kind of location, you could build a factory or a fire base or something that is properly walled to use in the game. But for me, to keep the flow going at the moment, the way I've built these is to have them so models can move around on the top. And this is a 40mm base, a group base, which I've standardized my new models that I've been putting together on that. And it just means when I was building the bits and pieces on the top, I wanted the interest, but I didn't want to like build some sort of monster on the top that I'd end up not being able to put models on. But at the same time, I had a conversation, only a brief one because it was kind of one-sided. Someone said something on Facebook and I replied, and then they didn't say anything else. But they'd said, oh, they like, you know, flat roofs for exactly what I've done here, putting bits and pieces on the top. But at the same time, you do have to be thoughtful of the fact that not every building has a flat roof. Some buildings do have some interesting shapes on them, and therefore it would be nice to represent those sometimes in a game, even though you might not be able to use the top of it to put models on. So yeah, I mean that's that one. And as I said, I need to sort of finish that gun. This one's probably got a logo I need to paint. Yeah, Hypervent I need to do on there. So those things I really should do before I weather, even though I don't really need to do them now. I could start with these washes. I'm going to paint that as well. So to get that, I'm just going to take that out because it's going to get in the way if I don't. Oh, and I do have completed ones here from the previous. This is the first round of doing these. I have gone back to these and put some graffiti on as well, so they could probably do with a little bit more weathering around there to sort of well, that one doesn't need it. I just put that stencil on there. That doesn't need really any extra weathering. But it's a rather bright looking kind of warning sign is in that piece, and that could probably do with some weathering over it. It's not really very easy to see. There it is. Oh, and there's another graffiti item there. Just a warning for you. I had some old decals water slide with tau symbols on. There's one up there, and there's one that's gone on down there. And they're the worst decals I've ever had. I actually put one above the door there as well, tau one, just because it had some fancy text, and I thought I'd stick it on. It looked about appropriate. But they're really bad. The Microsol, which is the decal softener that I used throughout the process of making these. So when you put these decals on like this, then initially they can look a bit shiny and they have a sort of edge to them. But if you use the Microsol and put 3 or 4 washes of that over, it softens. It's like a chemical, alcohol or something is in there. It softens the decal and then makes it adhere to the surface better. You still need to do a flat coat of varnish afterwards, but this really softens them and makes them look drawn or hand painted on. But do that on the Games Workshop decals, and they don't like it. They don't like the softener. It doesn't change them at all. They seem to be made of some sort of plastic that doesn't soften. And the result of that was that they just didn't adhere. That one's gone on okay now. I've sort of put a varnish on it. And this is another towel one down there. But it really, even when I got to the point of putting a flat coat on, they wanted to just peel off. Actually, that's coming off. That is coming off already. See, that's Games Workshop for you. Look at that. I suppose I could try and salvage it, but yeah, maybe just peel it off a bit, but the dull coat will maybe finish it. But yeah, I won't use their decals again because they don't soften very well. And the main base, that had another, put some small decals on above the door, and a little, someone had sort of tagged it there. I did actually try and attempt to put one of these Games Workshop ones there, and that peeled off as well. So there's another Games Workshop. I'm not even going to touch it because it's probably going to start to peel off. But I say it's been softened and it's had a varnish applied, and it still doesn't want to stay on. So those are annoying. And I'd done this before, obviously all the weathering on there, but I have added a decal underneath that logo, just which is a string of numbers that came on one of the strips that I had of water slides. So yeah, this one, interestingly, I used a lot of airbrushing of these colours as well on here. I kept going back to rust it with a sort of an airbrush. You can see I've used purples, oranges to spray on there. And the same goes for the roof. Here it had, I went back over with an airbrush of some purples. This stuff is wash, where it's come down there. That's a kind of a rust wash from lifecolor. But a lot of extra airbrushing, which I'm not going to really do on these other ones. I'm just going to use washes and things on them. So, right. I better start painting then, so I'll get some of these models out of the way. Yes, so I was going to do this one in red, so I'll start with the brown. So I just used Gun Corpse Brown. I'm going to use a big brush because it's a big old piece of text. I'm going to make all sorts of mess here, but let's get going anyway. In fact, I could do with a new brush. I wonder if I've got anyone that's a decent shape on it. And that is a whopper of a brush I've got over there. It's too big. That one will do. So it's a kind of, it's a Daleroni. Oh no, is it? Yeah, Daleroni graduate brush. Size 2. And just get some of that and put it on the wet palette. So I find, strangely enough, I don't know why, but both red and yellow I just find a great over a brown rather than straight over a white like this. Obviously the white would make yellow look very bright, but if I put the brown on, I'll be quite happy with that as well, really. Going on really thin with it. Just notice how hard it is to get an angle on this whilst also on the camera, but there you go. Yeah, so my painting style over the years has sort of evolved to be based mostly around Privateer Press paints, which I've got a lot of, the ones from the War Machine game. And here's a train spotterish like detail about the Privateer Press paints. They're actually formulated and designed by Mike McVeigh, who was an old Games Workshop employee and also went on to have his own miniatures company in the US. But he worked for Privateer Press, and in his time there he helped develop the paints. So so coming from Games Workshop, I guess he had the right experience to do that. And what he did is make them have a very fine pigment, which means they blend together very well. The focus wants to sort of move between the desktop and here. I could lock it. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I've decided while I started there, I'm going to put the brown into the bottom, which means the yellow, when it goes on, just using some glaze medium there as well, which I just like to blend into it, just thins it, makes it even more transparent and gives it a kind of a glaze look too. Because I like working with quite thin paint and then layering it. I can't see what I'm doing here, by the way, so I know I'm probably hitting the top of the doors and don't care, but I'm going for it anyway. Yeah, so what was I saying on this one? I said it was yellow, didn't I? But actually what I want to do is do red. So I'm going to get a good red as the next colour. So I've missed some there, the lip of the top of that door is just annoyingly in my way when I've got it angled up for the camera. Sorry about the tinkles from there. Right, so reds then. Crash, sorry about that, it's on the mic. I use this quite, that's quite a new red that I haven't owned yet. Yeah, I don't think I've got one of those ready to use. Okay, I must have run out of this and bought one of these recently. So this is probably, yeah, K-Door red base, so it's quite a strong one. I need to actually do the old classic, I name this ship grand opening of this bottle, and give it a shake. And also, since it's never been opened, drop a ball bearing in there as well to agitate it. And since that ban, so originally used to rely on their opacity with the use of lead, or even the Games Workshop ones. So I'm giving this a good old shake, sorry about that. So that's a good strong red, isn't it? Anyway, these are great paints, the Privateer Press ones. So yes, thank you Mike McVeigh, who used to work at Games Workshop, for going to Privateer Press and creating my favourite paints. But of course they are my own favourite choice. Everybody has their favourite paints. I was on a sort of Games Workshop style painting group the other day on Facebook, and nearly everyone on there had like antique bottles of paint that, you know, they used to belong to their grandmother. She used to use it to get rid of a toe fungus, plus handy for wart removal, and you know, painting nail varnishing on their toes, but still fantastic paints in these antique bottles from Games Workshop. And I think they sell for about £600 a bottle on eBay to the right buyers. But yes, we've all got those sort of stories, haven't we, where we used to have like an old wives' tale. I mean, they're in everything, aren't they? Everything from rabbit husbandry. If you're bringing up rabbits, you can look around. There's 1,000,001 old wives' tales for, you know, don't feed them this, do that. And definitely the same applies to painting and old paints in the world. So I could tell you these are the best paints ever made, but actually you'll have a, like I said, your granny's old fungus cream or something that you say, this is the best red ever. And I guess that, you know, there are generally, consensus can be formed, can't it, over, well, all of them, everybody uses this paint and it works great. I just happen to stick to these Privateer Press ones, and then washes wise, I like the paints from lifecolor. Lifecolor are interesting. That they basically stick with acrylics. They're an Italian company, and unlike AK Interactive, or well, there is another one other than AK, I can't remember what they're called, but they don't stray into the realm of using enamels or oils. They just stick to the using acrylics for washes and weathering, etc. So the order in which I do things, obviously, is first of all I will paint. So this is the paint stage, but later on I will do washes, and then I'll do chipping last. So where on my container park and things I'm going to do chips, they'll be the last thing that goes on, like a kind of paint chips after all the weathering's done. So around the top of that text, there's they're obviously a raised piece of their laser cut plastic, and what I'm going to do is wash in there. I'm not going to I'm not going to paint, although some of my paint has strayed, unfortunately, onto there. and you can see how quick and dirty it is now there. So if I keep that there, I won't be able to reach my paint pot. No, I will. If I put it just like that, probably won't focus on it. It will. Get it at an angle so the light's not reflecting off the wet paint. So you're going into that wet palette, which is now hard because it's behind everywhere. I'm just mixing some of the red in with the brown just to sort of blend between the brown and the red. Yes. I'm going to get a bit of yellow out while I'm here. And this, I'm going to show a little tip of something here as well, a little guide in between. So I want to use some of this yellow to highlight up now along the edge, along the top, so it's like a gradient from the yellow through the red to the brown. And this old pot, these old pots tend to have a little bit of a problem that they crack, and this one's gone. I have just shaken it, so I'm going to use what's there. I'm not going to waste that. But I happen to have a new lid. And yeah, great. Hold this over there, your paint job. Well, so if I hold it a little bit over there, so I'm not completely over my model, and then just cut through. It's quite fragile, so that just comes straight off. That's the old one, and then the new one, you just sort of pop over the top. It's going to crumble a bit while I do that. But again, don't want to do this over the model. There you go. So restored an old paint pot. There you go. You never thought you'd learn that today. These are really advanced techniques. I mean, these are beyond pro techniques, really. I shouldn't really be sharing it because this is only when you join and get up to the higher echelons, when you've been completely cleared of any negative thoughts, can you really learn that kind of secret, which is replacing the lids. Anyway, so I've got some yellow, and I've got it in there. Obviously, I'm probably going to waste a load of this now. I shouldn't have shaken it, should I? I should have just taken that off straight away. I'm just putting it into my wet palette. I'll leave that out of the way, because that's now one repaired pot of paint. Back to the case. So basically, still in the wet palette, I've got some of the mixing medium, the red and the brown. I'm just going to take some of the red, mix a little bit, so it's going a little bit orangey on there with the yellow, and then just do the tops of here, which are still a little bit wet and are kind of sort of wet blending slightly because, oops, putting it into the view, because I've used that glaze medium. It just takes longer for the whole thing to dry. So you get a little bit of blending on the model with these paints. And I know I'm going over the edges and it's annoying me because I can't see what I'm doing, but for the YouTube channel I'll make the sacrifice that I'm making a mess while I'm doing this. And for the sake of a good stream, I'll let you see what I'm doing. So without the glow on there, you can just about see what's going on. So if I take some neat yellow now, and mix it in with some of that glaze medium again, good stuff, glaze medium, and it mixes with all my paints, this Vallejo glaze medium. Shift over here a bit so that you can see what's going on. And now I'm just going to, I've got some on the brush. This is now a size 0 Tamiya modelling brush, a really antique one. You can see how much of my finger fudge has gathered on that over the years. And really with this I'm just going right on the top now and the edges. I don't mind that's looking a bit wavy. Some more of the neat yellow off my makeshift wet palette down here. I say I could use a bigger wet palette, but because I'm doing the streaming, I'm trying to keep a little bit spaces at a premium. Maybe if I was painting a model rather than a massive you know, 28mm model rather than a massive thing like this. So I think the brown just needs just another little bit of paint to make it more solid, because I went on really thin with it to start with. Still, I can't see the other side of this, unfortunately. If I can paint by looking at the screen instead of looking at the model, that would be hard work. My goodness. So, that's going to do, and remember this is just a clean paint that's gone on, and the plan is of course to weather it anyway. It's going to have weathering behind it to darken it, and yep, it's okay. Various views. The issue for me really is I have gone over the top a bit. It's tempting to give it a darker background, but the wash that I'm going to do on this will go behind there and darken that anyway. So that's that logo. The other one now. The other one's smaller. Oh no, it's not. Well, it's sort of smaller. This one I was just going to do yellow. So I'm just going to go with brown and then yellow, basically. I can see this one, and obviously what I'm doing here is going on really quick with the brown. Quite thin. Bit more pigment in that brush. Don't ask me what DCE stands for, I just picked it. As a kind of a company 3-letter abbreviation logo. I know DC sometimes stands, obviously, in the power world, but also data carrier, DCR, data carrier ready? I don't know. That one I'm just going to hit with the hairdryer. Yeah, that's too thin. Give me some paint off the edge there that's not gone all thin. At least I can see this one. The other one, I had the lip of the... So I'm not too fussed that it's perfect, because it is just the base coat for the yellow to go on top of anyway. If it's a little bit uneven, blast it again. Monday morning at work. Hello mate, what do you do over the weekend? Oh, I watched some paint dry on YouTube. It was really interesting. So I've got my... I should be using a bigger brush. Should be using a bigger brush there. Here we go. Got kind of a flattish brush, a graduate size 2 with the flat end. Get that yellow, mix it up. Too much water on it. There's enough on there. Let's splash it on and say big brush. A bit of flaking there. Maybe too much heat. I can tell actually the heat, the plastic of that has heated up, because this paint is literally drying as it hits the it. So yeah, that's something I've always done, is when I do golds, I always go on with a brown. For gold, I tend to use brown if I'm going on with red. I tend to use brown if I'm doing yellow, and it just is a little bit more forgiving. I know people will always sort of say, oh, well, if you want to get a really bright red, do or a bright yellow, put white on first. But it's just over the years I've ended up going for that technique, really. Don't know why. It just sort of works for me. Particularly golds work really well if I do a brown. So why is that going on like sludge? Probably need some more mixing medium in there. I am rushing this as well. I'm at the point where I'm kind of keen to get these done now, because I've spent quite many hours on them. Oh, look at that. I had a load of water on the brush. It's gone sliding down. Perfect technique. Again, with this, when I've done some weathering on this, it will get muck on there. Some streaking, rain streaking from that's gone on the signage and fallen down. I can see here I've used that pig iron to dry brush on there on that grill. That's going to take a nice black wash in there. I've done some dry brushing of silver in there too. And then also down the centre of these two doors I've done some silvering dry brush. It's kind of quick and dirty weathering before I've done any of the extra stuff. So here we go, hairdryer again, sorry. Get some more of the yellow. Get a little bit of that. mix it up on the edge of the palette. And another thin layer. It's now looking much more pleasing. What I might do is just give it an edge with some creamy colour, Menoth white highlight. Get some of that, mix it in with the yellow again, try and find a bit of space on the wet palette. Narrower brush, gone back to the size 0 Tamiya modelling brush. What I tend to do is kind of, which is I guess is a little bit slapdash, but when you've been painting for a few years and you don't really care anymore and you just sort of speed through things, as you know the end result's going to sort of please you in the end. I'm not always too worried if I don't get a consistent, like I haven't got completely consistent yellow on there, but it's good enough for me because it just looks worn and sort of weathered. Some people might, if they were doing this, taking real care, because it's such a small part of this overall model, you might try and get a really solid yellow, like I may have done with the airbrushing on the other areas. But I'm quite happy with the way it is, really. So it's not amazing, but it will take some weathering and streaking, and from a distance for the table it's an okay logo. Tempting to use just on the underside of it. Got another paint. Oh, this is another one with the lids going. But it's a grey called Crixbane Highlight, which is quite sort of a dark colour. I'm just going to, standing up now so I can get to this, I'm going to use that along the bottom trim. Just to sort of darken it a bit. I'm working on it. That will certainly do, and that will all get weathered and washed over anyway, so doesn't need any more work on there. And just put some of these paints away. So other things I need to paint on here, there's not much really. I think it's due for weathering really. This machine on the front, but I think I'll just leave it grey. Although I could do a couple of the switches in colour on there. It's like a little console thing, sort of tucked behind there, just that thing. And I could again just go on with a bit of the brown first of all. Try and get it in the screen. How am I going to do this? I can't see it. You can't see it. It's just in view. Oops, too much paint. Uh-oh, I've made a mess. Nearly salvaged. Not going to see this bit at all. There's another little switch down there. Yes, I've kept that simple. I think I mentioned in an earlier video, one of the things, there's quite a lot of eye candy on these already with various decals and graffiti and bits and pieces all over it. And what I don't want to do is make too many bright small things. So something with like that, I'll leave it at the kind of grey mostly, and then just a couple of switches I've painted on there. They'll be lost in the detail really. But if I made that like a bright blue or some other colour item down there, it kind of makes it too much like a candy store with lots of jelly bean colours all over it. Actually, I'll make a point about that actually. I just struck my mic, sorry. So on this one, if I zoom out, down at the base here there's a couple of small items, and I deliberately left them, well, one of them I did in a kind of a bluish colour, but then I left these almost like the colour, the grey, they'd been dry brushed, and maybe I just went over them with a bit of silver or something. And the plan with that was just to leave them almost like a neutral grey, so they didn't have another blue barrel, another green something that was just making it too many colours on there. Oh, hi Mario7 on Twitch. Thanks for putting a post on. That's the first ever Twitch comment I've had, so thanks very much for that. I feel real. Actually, there's a lot of painters on Twitch, and a lot of top popular airbrushes and things from in the 40k Games Workshop sort of realm that have moved from YouTube and find a bigger audience on Twitch. But I don't know. I've never used it. I just switched it on recently, and just because everybody else is doing it. So that one's now drying with that logo. And I've got some of those other small details to do, and I'm a bit nervous about these. They're brass etched images on here that are really hard to see unless I zoom right in and get the focus on it. You can just see it says lab there. Oof, when it focuses. If I move it over there you go. It says lab above the graffiti, and on the door there's a kind of hand stop sign as well. But now I notice I've put it on a bit of a bad jaunty angle. And you can see the brass etched lab. You see it does have an edge when I move it around. But yeah, I'm really nervous about painting that in any kind of successful way without, because I like to do things slapdash and quickly. And the same applies, there's no other logos on the front there to do. Those are just the two things on this one, lab and a little door, a little hand on the door. So given that's a hand that I'm going to do red, I'll start with a brown mixed with a bit of red off the palette, and I'll try and pull out a bit so we can see what's going on. Otherwise, if I do it any other way, I'll not be able to see what I'm doing myself. Yeah, this is hard on camera. In the scheme of things, a water slide decal here of a no entry sign or something would be better than brass etched. It's kind of a bit overkill, but I had it in the box. So that's the hand done in brown. I don't know what colour to do. I think I should do the lab thing in a pale blue. There's a handy blue, arcane blue. I've run out of wet palette, but I'm going to splodge it in there anyway. Take that little truck out of there, put some of that in. Thin it down with a bit of the thinners that's now mixed with red. Gloss medium, sorry, not thinners. So, you know, wish me luck. I'm going to try and attempt now. I'm getting close to this lab. Even getting in close now, I'm worried about it. It needs to be really thin down paint because I don't want to. Get too much overspill. The word lab is appearing slowly. The A is a bit rubbish. Well, I'm going to do the raised bottle as well bit in the middle, which you probably can't see. It's like a flask with the same sort of delicate strokes. It's got so little a lip that I'm just going to move the mic over a bit, so just noticed you may hear some mic noise. There you go. It's got such a small lip on it that it's easy to accidentally touch the rest of the building. No one's giving me any encouragement. I was hoping for like a cheer or something on the there's a message saying well done, that looks really hard. Yeah, I've got overspill there. So what will happen with this is when I put the weathering on and the washes, they will accentuate this, particularly around the text there. What happens if I do that now? Let's do that now. With a very tiny bit of this black grey from lifecolor, which I'm going to put in the text. It's a little bit more visible, but it's not gone as good as I'd like. Well, I'll put it down to it's not a fantastic symbol to try and paint really in any way. Because it's such a thin piece of material. I wonder, I've got some kerosene wash here I'm going to put on the in the bottle area just to sort of darken it. Overspill, damn it. Not impressed at all by the dark colour that I used on there. I'm going to use this blue burned exhaust. The grey was too washy-wishy or wishy-washy in that lab bit. I'm start up in here actually, because I can thin it down a bit. Went on a bit heavy there as well. Yes, I've no idea if I'm going to build any audience in Twitch for any of my streams, because they're a bit not really very traditional, as in they're not gaming and they're not sort of 40k. So always interested in any feedback. So I've done a thing I told myself I wouldn't do, which is rather than finishing all the painting on all the models, I've got stuck into something that I'm tempted to do. So when that happens, I'm ending up doing some weathering. And I'm really just not happy with that bit on there, the lab text. Either needs to be a lot darker in there. I could give it a white edge. So that's what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to hit it with a dryer. Get myself some white. Get myself a super tiny brush. And then I'm even going to use my magnifier properly. Now I can see it. Now I can see it. good. I need some glaze medium. Wish I'd never put it on there, but it's now visible, even though I had to recover myself there. It's such a tiny piece of text. And there's no lip at all. Invisible. Too much detail. Actually, yeah, Vivek, that's probably a good idea. Maybe a fine tip pen. Reaches over for fine tip pens. 03, is this really small? That's too fat. Going through my pens and they're all a bit fat. Maybe even this one could do it. This one could do it. See how much of a bodge I do with a fine tip pen. Oh, hi Corey, thanks for saying you can hear me. Let's zoom into it. I can't see it now zoomed in. Ugh. Oh yes I can. That's going to be me on that, I think, because it's okay. Any more touches on there and I'll probably destroy any semblance. Well, I should really go across the bottom of the A. There, it says lab. Whew. And it's visible from Mars as well now. Yeah, funny you should say that. Maybe it could do with a black line. I think this one's too fat. Let me have a look about, see if I've got a finer one. I do. Also, this is grey. Oh shit. Excuse the language. Oh shit, gone on it again. Salvaged. Oh, it's such a fine edge that my clumsy old hands keep rolling off it. It's late on a Sunday. I can fix it. Just when you think you've got an edge to deal with, it tricks me. I'm so far away actually, you can't even see the action. See the errors even. Yeah, so thanks very much to Vivek. I've kind of highlighted it a bit more there. Probably need to come around the bottom and also do a tidy up job on it. That's my magnifier. It's the only way I could actually see anything that small, even with my glasses on. So I was using a pigment liner there, Stedler, for Gundam, and this one was a Micron archival ink. Both of those will be a bit shiny until they've been dull coated. But now I can get a little bit of that blue again, which I've still got on the wet palette in the corner down there. And just tidy it up, and then I'll be done with it. It's one of those annoying things that I didn't intend to spend so much time on. just because I've got some of this wash in my hand, I'm going to put some on the door. So this is the burnt exhaust lifecolor, which is essentially an acrylic pin wash, but I'm splashing it all over there with no regard for being too careful, because it's not a really dark pin wash. It's just going to discolour the whole area. Oh, slightly off the screen. So yeah, up close, obviously close scrutiny, but then a bit further out, it's still clear. Yes, thanks. I did trace around the vial. Didn't read that, but I just went straight for it and continued the technique around the little vial thing too. So that's okay. It was a bit hard work. That was too hard going, but generally, overall, it's interesting. Is that the last thing I've got to paint on there, really? I think it is before I do washes and things. Yeah. Oh no, there is... Ugh. Yeah, there's another one of these. Look at this. To haunt me. Try and get that wet palette a little bit into more of a safety zone there. Right on the front, in the most awkward of places, there's another one. Lab 2, above Darth Vader's stencil. So starting this one correctly this time. Of course, these pigments are pigment pens are shiny ink. As I said before, it will double down with the dull coat that finally goes on the whole thing. I mean, what you could do with these pigment, you could go to town with these pigment pens. I could just, it's cheating really, but I could go around all these things in here, couldn't I? Oh, I think I've peeled some paint off with that one there. That was good. Yeah, don't go too heavy with your pigment pens. Pulled a whole set of paint out of there off the resin underneath. Yeah, not wise. I'm pulling that off the resin. Do not do. Those are just going to need a really heavy wash to look sort of grimed up. Don't worry about the fact that there's a little bit of oh, that's where it's fallen down. Lost focus. I'm a bit zoomed in as well. So this is what I was intending to do, the weathering really, but I'm now rushing it because I've been at it for quite a while. Beginning to lose energy. Destroyed by that lab sign that just distracted me. So the reason I'm being slapdash here is I'm using this as an example. I'm using a big brush, I'm making a mess with this. It's pooling up everywhere, but there's a reason. I'll zoom in. So you can see I've made a big mess with that. Now I'm going to use this stuff called the remover. And I've had mixed results with it. It's not the best thing ever, but lifecolor remover, and this is meant to help remove this off a bit like if you were using an enamel pin wash into there. So you can see the burnt blue exhaust has spilled out and pooled a little bit. So I think I'm going to need a reasonably big damp brush. This messy old one I've got here. Decant some of that out onto this tray to sort of moisten the brush and just see how it affects pulling that off or blending it. Yeah, it's not perfect. Definitely looks like it's blending it a little bit. Losing some of that yeah, it does pick it off. I mean, it's not as good as acrylic because I can see it's just smudging it around more than Sorry, not as good as enamel. I can see it's having more of a smudge. I'm not really completely wiping it off. I'm more sort of smudging it about. That's one thing when you use the enamel pin washes and then you use a thinner, you can really wipe it off and leave the clear paint from underneath on show, and you're just not getting that with these lifecolor acrylic version. But there's a bit of an overstain there. This is moving it around. This is where it's going to be interesting on these pin lines where I just splashed it here. It just doesn't completely remove it like a enamel, unfortunately, but it's still a nice way of thinning down that pin result, just to look a little bit more tidy than it was and less harsh. Around some of this bit here it's gone quite heavy. Kind of, you have to keep cleaning your brush as well, because that's the one thing with an enamel thinner, it just takes it off, but this one you end up with it all. There you go, that's coming off there okay. So now I can see it's now loaded itself back into the brush because I've taken it off. But whatever you say about it, it is a blended result that happens in the end. So I can still see I've got staining on the top there, but it's so subtle that it's kind of looking okay. Well done, camera, for not focusing. So yeah. So again, if I load my brush with some of that remover, I should be able to sort of blend on here. I don't want to go near that lab 2 because that's had a pen in there and that will not be so good. So yeah, that's the results that you can get with the, and that's just their colour burnt, blue burnt exhaust. If I get a black umber, that was going to go better on the door, isn't it? I think. Get some of that out. Lesson for Games Workshop: one-handed lid removal. I think you probably do actually one-handed lid removal with Games Workshop pots. Could be a bit tricky though. So this is another one of the paints that will come off with that remover, but I'm just going to use a thin brush and just sort of pop it into the black spaces here. When I say black, I mean the deep crack. So again, if I make a mistake, I know I can remove it after. I could use that pen in through here as well, but as I found out, for some reason in here that pen started to, because I pushed a bit hard on the pen, it started to remove. scratch off my paint. So this is before the chipping, because the chipping comes later when this is all done. So you do the washes first, and then I do chipping. It's like the final step. Could even show you what I'm doing. It's just griming everything up. And there's that roof that's had the... I've stripped off the... some of that weathering. So a great candidate for a lot of this stuff would be this, which is going to need a bigger brush. That thing there. This is a fan that I've put on the side. So if I start with that, I can also do some rust kind of washes on there too. I've got a burnt umber here. Although if I'm doing rust properly, I'd need some proper orangey colours as well mixed into the process. This is the worst bit of the model. I don't know why I put it on, but I put it on the other one, so I've kept to it on here. But the MDF of having three little panels of MDF to make an exhaust sort of thing like that is awful. It doesn't look does it much like realistic piece of a model. So this is that burnt umber, and you can see it's neatly gone into the top of that sort of green barrel there already. The other large doors, which probably, I mean, they're going to take some chipping nicely, but here's the so let's try this technique again. So going up the middle with it, and it's on, the pigment's quite strong. So this is speed doing it. Let's see what happens now if I use a thinner brush to pull off the paint before it's even dried on with the remover. Just to sort of blend it in a bit. Yeah, that's the one thing with this remover, you do just have to keep getting more of it. Unlike enamel thinners that would just be more forgiving and less, definitely not requiring as many brush reloads. See, the brush has now picked up enough pigment that it's removed with the remover. It definitely makes it more subtle. Obviously it's spreading it around a bit, but that's no harm in that, as long as you can sort of clean it off. Well, not clean it off, but at least blend and thin it to the point that it doesn't look like a massive tide mark. It looks more natural. Yeah, see, again, picked up too much on the brush of the pigment with the remover. I reckon it might be easier if you let let it dry. It's not a bad result. There's a bit up there, so let's use this remover properly on it, and let's zoom in forensically. There you go, right at the top of that. There's some overspill. Let's use the remover, lifecolor remover, and just smear it off. Needs a little bit of work. Yeah, it's close to removed. It's not like magic ink or anything. See how that's drying off around there as well, that vent. I reckon that vent needs some proper rust colours, some real rust paint in there. rather than just the washes. Let's go radical. Let's go radical. Let's use a Citadel contrast colour. This is called Griffin Hound, Gryffindor Muggle Juice. It's one of the best sellers in the range. No, I don't know. It's sort of an orangey colour. So this is a... Oh dear. So see how strong that is? Get some water quick. Rescue remedy. Yeah, I mean that's the Citadel. I mean, unfortunately I'm not going to be able to pull that off with the life colour stuff. And then I go on there with a bit of stronger stuff in the bottom. You can see how nice and orangey it is. Oh, it's lost focus. I can't see anything. Well, that's evidence anyway that you can see that this can be layered with the life colour. Bit of a tide mark there, I'm just using some water. Just to sort of splat it around and make it look a little less even. See if it blends even with the life colour stuff. Let's get some life colour off the palette down here, the blacker stuff. Can't see what I'm doing again, sorry. Whoa. So yeah, tonight's progress started on that vent, which I'm going to make look really sort of grimy and rusty, and that's just a sort of start of that process. Did that text on there, hypervent. Hi Edward. And obviously just weathered some of that central area of that door. These will need chipping. As I said, after I've done the weathering, I'll do some chipping techniques on them as well. Might do the sort of flicking brush or a sponge. Sponge is kind of quick, I'll probably use a sponge. Plus I did this daft thing here, so if anybody's really bored, watch back on this video because you can see me doing about 4 attempts on that lab before Vivek Chandra really helped me by pointing out that I could use a pen to go around the outside of it, which saved my skin. And then I didn't really done anything on the front, but I did do the lab text there. I should really paint that brighter colour there around the lab to highlight that in a different colour maybe. Or I could leave it, it's okay. And then I did some weathering on there and a weathering on the top with the life colour, which is blended nicely. The life colour on the top there now just looks kind of dirty and dusty. So that's that. So here's the roof section for this one, which has had some dry brushing. And the other thing I need to paint, I just realised I've got an air conditioner on there that had some overspill from here, which needs some paint on it. If I can, that dangerous situation where there's a few pots kind of half open now on here and plates and all sorts in the way. But I did have a white out earlier, which I'll just get a little bit more of to dry brush really on that air conditioning unit on the top of that roof. So because this is a separate MDF piece, and I put an N scale subway access stairs in there, I can take it off. And of course I'm going to do some clear acetate stuff inside at the end after I've done all the painting to just make sure the windows have some glass in them. Oh, this is a bit easier. Painting really large models like that, it's really hard on the camera and everything because I can barely get the model into a position that can be seen by the camera whilst also getting my body around it. It's hard going. So I've just got some white on a brush that's probably not dry enough to, nearly dry enough just to go over this air conditioning unit, because that's the other thing that needs painting. I'm trying to sort of finish off anything that still needs painting on these before any more weathering done. Yeah, so I've got quite a heavy dry brush just to sort of cover up. I mean, it's still, the neat thing is that it's had some overspray for some grey and things on there, and I'll just leave that because that will just make it look like it's dust and grime on the vents or something. Just wanted to make it look a little less like it had overspray on it. Like you can see here, all that overspray from the from when I did the reservoir of oil or whatever it happens to be in there. Again, I'm not too fussed though. This is just for wargaming, so I say that after spending like nearly half an hour and just typing that, doing that lab logo, because it annoyed me. I don't know if it probably gets everybody at some point when you're doing a paint job on something. You get caught on something that doesn't turn out like it should, and you end up spending too much time on a tiny bit of the model instead of all of it, when you should just move on. But yeah, that was handy to have Vivek give me a tip on using one of my pens. So that's that. Just white now. Obviously that will take a wash of something to rust it up as well. It just looks like a traditional aircon unit. Why don't I try some of this? What have I got in front of me here? The burnt umber again, in the interests of just doing things quickly. Grimes it up nice and quickly. go, can't resist continuing that grime around the base of this storage tank. So yeah, gone on a bit heavy in there with that rusty factor, but I've just dried my brush on the thing, and it just means I can just pull some of that out as well. Just something worth pointing out with this sort of wash. It's quite forgiving, this lifecolor wash, in terms of being able to get it off there quickly. So that's that painted, that rooftop. Oh, hi Hewlett, I don't know if you're watching, but thanks for subscribing. Streamlabs has reminded me that you've subscribed, so thanks if you're still watching at all. So there it is, back in the top, and slightly weathered, drying, but sort of done really. Well, not the whole model, but the air conditioning unit. I'm going to use oils when I do, because I know how to control my oils more than these lifecolor things. I'll probably do oil stains down here, and then the odd chip. And some of the oil stains will come over I keep wanting to call them tattoos, but the graffiti slide on there too. Oh, paint-wise, I want to do some console on there as well. I'm not going to do that right now. Trying to find out where I've put the other lid. Here's the other base. And here's the other roof / lid. So this one, again, it's an MDF. These are MDF kits from Sarisa Precision. I can fire up that. If I probably go to here and hit this button, wiggle the mouse. So this is Sarisa Precision, who make these kits, and I just sort of do extra kit bashes on them. So these are in the 15mm range, and they're in their industrial 15mm range. This is basically the shell of what I'm making. At the core is that, but I just add lots of extra bits of resin and things. So you can see the sort of prices are quite reasonable, really. I think they're based in Scotland, Sarisa Precision, and yeah, they're really fast shipping. I think they definitely do worldwide shipping if you're interested in their stuff. Obviously, I'm not sponsored or anything in any way, but you can see there's that core. If I flip between the two, you can see that's that. The other one, I used that ladder on the side, on the base. On this one, I haven't used the ladder, but I've used 2 resin shipping containers on the side. In addition, some other resin steps up there, because there's a door that's meant to be connected to where that ladder goes down on the side. I've left the door. I've added a metal door kit, sort of not a kit bash, but that's a Ground Zero Games, another UK company that make these doors. So I've glued that on to give it a little bit more 3D realism than just a hole. And then I've built up what's like a sort of step up around there, which obviously can take models, go with an RPG. I could even put one of these in the roof. Check this out. So I could put, although the base work is somewhat focused on a concrete and it's not exactly laying there flat, but you could put a weapon mount in the roof there as well. In fact, I could actually take it off that. I could go as far as to say you could put like a little weapon mount like that in there on the rooftop, which looks quite cool, except I haven't built it like that, so I'm not going to use it that way, but it's got rotary autocannons on there. But yeah, I've obviously built this so that you can move models up and down it, and so they can use some space on the roof. I'm not going to use the interior. While I'm wargaming, if I'm playing the grunts rules, I would say they could be inside the building, but I'm not going to manhandle models in. I would just take them off board or put them on the roof and say, oh, they're inside the building at the moment firing out. Or if they're on the rooftop, you can just pop them up there. And as I build these, I mentioned as I started this video 2 hours ago, 2.5 hours ago, I mentioned that these models, I build them so that there's space around. There's a wall to offer cover here, but I'm not going to like completely give them cover if someone was moving out in this area. And yeah, just generally that's the idea, but also this is obviously offering a level of defence that can also be used by models at the same time. Yeah, so that rooftop's the other one, which has got a larger of the sort of reservoir oil tank type things on the top, and some small bottles beside it. Oh, and another gun which I need to paint. I need to paint the stock on that. And I mentioned earlier, these are from Plastic Soldier Company, and they do a sprue of World War II weaponry, and there's loads of machine guns and rifles and things in that kit. And in the spirit of those sort of computer games, even though I'm not playing a computer game where you leave weapons around or someone's strewn it aside or for whatever reason it's been left on the roof. And this one has a Ground Zero Games hatch. So again, the roof is the MDF roof that it came with, but I've added to it I've added a metal plate, I've added that barrel, and also I've poked to keep it secure, I've poked that resin pipe work through the base by drilling a hole. In fact, I don't drill a hole in MDF, you can just cut with a knife. And that's got another fan that's going to get weathered up on that side too, and this is another resin piece that's gone on top of the, if I go back to it, it's gone on top of there. And you can see how sort of basic they look without a decent set of stuff on the top, but if you kit bash them up, you can turn them into quite a sci-fi looking piece of terrain. So yeah, I've been on here for ages. It's now 9:15 and I'm going to finish up. Because I've done quite a lot there and spent too long doing a stupid sign with lab written on it, but rescued again by Vivek, thank you, on that. So I shall switch back to me. Hot after doing that. There's my bloody, try and turn that off without blasting out. That's my magnifier, which I needed when I was doing that close-up work. And thanks if you've listened in. It's been 2 hours and 30 minutes of streaming. And yeah, I think I mentioned in the previous video that I like streaming now, because what I used to do when I did YouTube videos was spend hours crafting in post-production, which meant that I filmed everything and then spent hours reducing it down to a shorter video, which is obviously better for the viewer potentially, because you can just pop on and go, or just watch that concise short 20-minute video on those techniques with all the rough edges cut out. But I lose hobby time, because with this it's hobby time the whole way. Means I'm just working on it the whole way through, which is what I want to do, and by putting it on camera people get to see the bits and pieces I'm doing, which I'm fine with. It just means it's a bit unedited, and you might find some sections end up dragging on, so skip those anyway. So have a good week at work. If you're off to work this week, it's Sunday, so Monday time tomorrow, and please try and get yourself some hobby time this week if you can. Set aside an hour for hobby activity. So I'm going to stop streaming by pressing a button down here and say goodbye, good night.